Thank you.
Thank you, the Jolly Beggars. So thank you, and welcome to our online Burns night. So thank you so much for joining us. I'm sorry that we're not live with you again, but next year I'm sure we will be, that's for sure. Okay, so here we are, yes, celebrating the life of Robert Burns. And this year particularly, we're focusing on Burns's relationship with the natural world. You'll pick up some of that detail when we go over to our interview with Andrew O'Hagan, but also through the choice of songs and verse that we've selected for you this evening. In a moment, I will return you to our house band, who are going to give you their version of My Heart is in the Highlands. But as is customary, before we go any further, let us raise a glass, please, to absent friends, those for whom we would wish to be with, but they are not with us today. So, to absent friends, may we see you again soon. So, the Jolly Beggars, named after a Burns poem in which a young lass is drawn into the company of some lively tykes who, despite misfortune and property, reject the values of conventional society in favour of love, wine, and song. So, the tykes are Jeremy Clancy, Arthur Scammell, Geraint Ballinger, Jake Currant, and that lady, Swallow. So, back to the Jolly Beggars, and Heart is in the Highlands.
So, wrote this song last year for the other online Burns night, and guilty secret, I wrote it because I didn't think I could remember anybody else's. So, this is Hearts in the Highland, and you've got a picture. Wild running roe and wonderful scraggy moors.
Farewell to the Highlands, farewell to the North, the birthplace of valor, the country of worth. Wherever I wander, wherever I roam, the hills of the Highlands, forever I'll love. All my heart's in the Highlands, my heart is not here. My heart's in the Highlands, chasing the deer, chasing the wild deer, following the road. My heart's in the Highlands, wherever I go.
To the Highlands, farewell to the north. Royal forest breaking the valleys below. Farewell to the forest and wild hanging woods. Farewell to the rivers and the loud
All together.
floods.
All my heart's in the Highlands, my heart is not here. My heart's in the Highlands, chasing the deer.
valor, the country of worth. Wherever I wander, wherever I roam, the hills of the Highlands forever.
All together!
Oh, my heart's in the Highlands. My heart is not here. My heart's in the Highlands, chasing the deep, chasing the wild deer, following the road. My heart's in the Highlands, wherever
I go.
my heart's in the Highlands. My heart is not here. Oh, my heart's in the Highlands. My heart is not here. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. And yeah, we're already ahead of schedule, so we're just going to change the running order a little bit, and we're going to go straight into Bros and Butter with Layla Brown.
Bread and butter. Apparently this has other meanings.
It does.
Bread and butter. We're going to treat it as if it's a culinary song.
Come to the middle. Yeah. Okay. Give me love rose, rose. Give me love rose and butter. Give me love rose, rose. You sweet me. Wanted to separate love is a dainty dish. And kisses holler within the sight would make you blush. And all the fun is to finish. Give me love rose, rose. Give me love rose and butter. Give me love rose, rose. Jenny said no with the love. Johnny said to be out of the wind and he went to the west and made all the windows stick clatter. And give me love rose, rose. Give me love rose and butter. Give me love rose, rose.
All together, clap your hands! Yes!
Give me love rose, rose. Give me love rose and butter. Give me love rose, rose. And love is a dainty dish. Your kisses holler within the sight would make you blush. But
Oh, the fun is a finishing. Give me love rose, rose. Give me love rose and butter and give me love rose, rose.
give me love rose, rose. Give me love rose, rose.
Give me love rose.
Give me love rose, rose. Give me love rose.
I call an answer.
Give me love rose, rose. Give me love rose, rose.
Give me love rose, rose.
Give me love rose, rose.
Give me love rose and butter and give me love rose, rose.
Give me love rose and butter and give me love rose, rose. Wanted to summer and give me love rose. Give me love rose and butter and give me love rose, rose. Wanted to summer and love is a dainty dish. And kisses holler within the sight would make you blush. But now the fun is to finish. Give me love rose, rose.
Give me love rose and butter and give me love rose, rose. 1, 2, 3, and give me love rose and butter and give me love rose, rose. give me love rolls, rolls. Give me love rolls and butter, give me love rolls, rolls. Give me love rolls, rolls. Give me love rolls and butter and give me love rolls, rolls. Woo! 1, 2, 3, and
Wonderful, wonderful. Layla Brown with the Jolly Beggars. Another round of applause, please. So, Robert Burns died, I'm afraid, in 1796 at the tender age of 37. If you know his life history, he lived hard. But having already achieved considerable fame for his verse and for his songs. Then friends of his gathered at his cottage the year after his death to celebrate his birthday, and the Burns Supper was born, and I suspect has been celebrated most years since that time. No Burns Supper, of course, would be complete without the sound of the bagpipes. So I am very pleased to be able to introduce local piper Keith Thompson, piping in the haggis, borne aloft by our good friend Ratnadeva, and yes, that is an Irish tongue. Gentlemen, the haggis! So, you dressed to the haggis. Fair fire your honest sonsy face. Great chieftain, all the pudding the race. Above them all, you take your place. Stomach, tripe, or intestines. Well, are you worthy of a grace? As long as groaning trencher there you fill your buttocks like a distant hill, your pain would help to mend a mill in time of need, while through your pores the dews distill like amber bead. His knife rustic labor one, and cut you up with ready slight. Trenching your gushing entails bright like any ditch, and then, oh, what a glorious sight! Warm, rich. You powers who make mankind your care and dish them out their bill of fare. Old Scotland wants no watery stuff that splashes in small wooden dishes, but if you wish her great prayer, give her Scotland a haggis! Raise your glasses, please, to the haggis! The haggis!
the haggis!
was apparently a grace which predated Burns himself, but he gave the grace at a meal with the Earl of Selkirk and has therefore become the Selkirk grace. This is a meat-based grace, and I appreciate that some of you may, including myself, may be eating a vegetarian haggis this evening. So when I say meat, please insert the words McSween's vegetarian haggis, itself a mouthful. And when I say Lord, please insert whatever divinity you are currently worshipping. Thank you. Okay, here is the Selkirk grace, after which you may eat your haggis. Some have meat and cannot eat it, and some would eat that want it. But we have meat and we can eat. Say, let the Lord be thanked. So now, please, for those of you eating at home, please enjoy your supper. We will be doing the same here. And we now will be joined by our special guest, Andrew O'Hagan, who has recorded a conversation for us with Catherine Kelly, my co-host. So Andrew O'Hagan, local author and Burns aficionado, in conversation with Catherine Kelly on the subject of Burns's special relationship with the natural world, which Andrew describes as the cornerstone of his genius. So we will now be going to video, and we will be back with you live in 15 minutes.
Welcome, Andrew, and thank you for taking the time to share your extensive knowledge.
It's great to be here.
Oh, it's great to see you. We've been so keen to have you on our Burns Night for quite a while, so this is very exciting for us to be able to explore the world of Burns directly with you. So let's get to it. When was your first encounter with Robert Burns, and what impression did that leave you?
Well, it's an endless pleasure to be able to celebrate Burns the way we are tonight in this great company, because actually my first introduction to Burns was at school in Scotland, where Burns was used by certain headmistresses in those days as a kind of punishment tool against errant Scots boys and girls, you know, where you would be marched, I think the appropriate word is frog marched into the community hall to recite Burns if you had behaved badly or you were late with your homework. So there was a famous occasion when I was, I couldn't have been more than 8 or 9, I think, and Mrs. Ferguson, the rather frightening headmistress at St. Luke's Primary School in Kilwinning, Ayrshire, grabbed me by the collar and dragged me into the gym hall, and she said, "I know what to do with a boy like you." And she handed me the words to "My love, she's but a lassie yet," and immediately sat down at the piano and started playing, "Oh, my love, she's but a lassie yet, my love, she's but a lassie yet, but let her stand a year or two, she'll no be hapsy saucy yet." And of course, I was completely mortified. She brought in the whole school to witness this humiliation. So Burns was a bad start for me. But actually, joking aside, that early introduction to his work provided a kind of stimulus. Here was a poet writing in the accent that we heard every day. You know, even if you're a literary kid and even if you're a bookish, you're very often faced with language which feels quite remote. You know, I'm a great Shakespearean now, but at that young age, you know, even the more accessible of Shakespeare's plays, they felt antique, they felt removed, they felt distant from everyday expression and everyday feeling. Burns didn't. Burns felt utterly local. All the more so to us. We lived in Ayrshire. Burns was born only 10 miles away from where I was spending my childhood. And those same phrases, that same language that sounds so obscure to some listeners still, felt utterly native to us. So when I heard the words of those poems, I thought, this is my poet. You know, it was like a real voice of fellowship and intimacy right away, whispering into our ears.
It's extraordinary that your teacher would use Burns to punish as a punishment
Well, I think it was thought that literature was a kind of hard subject, and that you would have, it was a bit like rote learning. Rote learning wasn't quite a punishment, but it was like hard work. You used to whack the blackboard with a rod, even as it were Keats or Wordsworth. It was always this kind of whacking sound under the words, as you were learning the poems by rote. So there was a kind of, if you like, a blend of learning and corporal punishment in the educational mindset of those days, and trying to separate that out and actually get to the joy of the work in the natural rhythm and playfulness and fellowship and friendliness of Burns's work became a lifetime project. But that thwacking, I can still hear it in the meter and the rhythms of some of those poems,
But that's wonderful to hear that art and beauty won out over all of that, and it touched your heart and gave you a lifelong love of Burns and passion.
Well, it did, Catherine, and I think one of the reasons for that is to do with the relationship between Burns's poetry and nature. Is that there we were in a very physical, natural environment. It was, we were 25 miles away from Glasgow. We were on the coast. Ayrshire's a very, very beautiful county. It's not given credit for quite how beautiful it is. It's this both seascape and this woodland environment. And it's shaped like an amphitheatre, looking down and crescenting down to the sea, with the Isle of Arran and Ailsa Craig out there in the sea. Utterly beautiful. And it was seeing that natural landscape sort of handled, evoked, sort of really encapsulated in Burns's poetry. The very down on the fields, the hurpling hares that he talks about, the mosses, watters, slaps and styles that you hear about in Tam O'Shanter. Once you've read that and you've been in that environment, then there is then a unity between form and content, between presence and imagination. That's literature at its best. When you're actually in a living portrait, not just some antique written version that feels ever so slightly beautiful but removed. This felt like a kind of fully flowering natural world with the words attached. So that relationship between nature and poetry in Burns is instrumental. It's the cornerstone of his brilliance, I think. And for us, we were given a special vantage point by being kids in Ayrshire.
And growing up, how aware were you of all that, the environment? I mean, it's right on the west coast of Scotland, south of Glasgow, near Prestwick Airport, that area, and the Atlantic Ocean blowing in.
Completely aware, I think. I mean, we were port towns, places like Saltcoats and Irvine and Ayr. These are old mercantile port towns where you look out towards the Atlantic, you look into the Irish Sea, first Ireland, and then, as we understood, America. And so did Burns. There was a tremendous sense of the West Indies, of another world, a fresh world out there. And for all the hardships that could be experienced at home, there was almost a promise on the horizon, or a possibility out there. And that's everything, with nature at your back and all around you, that there was also this kind of metaphorical journeying forward to be done. And Burns, again, is full of that sense of the solid landscape, but also the world out there. It's very interesting to be talking to you about this so close to the period of COP26 having happened, again, 25 miles away from Burns's birthplace, only in the last few months. This sense of a threat to the environment in the natural world would have been utterly crucial to Burns's understanding of what our moral problem was today. It's encoded in the letters, it's there in the poems, a sense that we have a responsibility to husband and steward the land that was our birthright. That without giving a huge, political speech on behalf of the environmental cause, one doesn't have to, you just need to read those poems. They're in love with the land, and they're in love with the preservation of what's beautiful and all too fleeting in our experience of the natural world. So the movements today in 2022 that are so pressing and so important to us to save the planet, Burns would have been a revolutionary spokesman on that, I believe.
And you talked of the beauty of the land that would have inspired Burns, but there's also the harshness of nature to people living in that age. Burns himself had to work as a ploughman since a very young boy. I think as he grew older, he actually had a natural stoop from working the land. Harsh winters, illness, disease, poverty.
He died very young, and he didn't die, because he had to. This was a very hard life. He was, if you like, chased into his grave by too much hard work, too much foul weather. I mean, towards the end of his life, he was working as an exciseman or a taxman, as we would know it, going around in a rather sort of trembling, slow donkey from house to house in old fishwife's barrel to fishwife's barrel, looking for goods that could be taxed. In all weather, soaked to the skin, his very bones ached, he said. This was a man with, a very little chance of a long life, and he didn't have one. And I think that hardship you talk about is also central to the poems. I mean, one of his most crucial poems, I'm just going to read it to you to remind you. I mean, one of the great and famous poems, To a Mouse, is really about these things we've been talking about. It's about that relationship between humankind and the animal kind, the world of other creatures. And here he is as a ploughman, often referred to in his own lifetime as the heaven-taught ploughman. This man pushing a plough through the fields, trying to earn a living to keep his wains and his family alive. He turns up a mouse in his plough, and such is the sympathy and the essential genius of this poet that he can look at this mouse and come up with this. To a mouse. Wee, sleeke, coeren, timorous beastie. Oh, the panic's in thy breastie. I needna start away sae hasty wi' bicker and brattle. I would be laith to rin and chase thee wi' murder and pattle. I'm truly sorry. Man's dominion has broken nature's social union and justifies that ill opinion that makes thee startle at me, thy poor earth-born companion and fellow mortal. I doubt na whiles that thou may thieve. What then, poor beastie? Thou mun live. I dae me knicker in a thrave's a small request. I'll get a blessing with a lave and never miss it. A wee bit of hoosie, too, and ruin. It's silly was the winds are strewing, and nothing new to beg a new ain of foggage green. And bleak December's winds ensuing, baith snell and keen. Thou saw the fields laid bare and waste, and weary winter coming fast, and cosy here, beneath the blast. Thou thought to dwell, till crash, the cruel coulter passed out through thy cell. That wee bit heap of leaves and stibble has cost thee mony a weary nibble. Now thou's turned out for all that trouble, but hoose or hold to thole the winter's sleety dribble and cranrich cold. But Moosey, thou art no thy lane, and proven foresight may be vain. The best laid schemes o' mice and men gang after gley, and leave us naught but grief and joy, grief and pain for promised joy. Still, thou art blessed compared with me. The present only toucheth thee, but och, I backward cast my eye on prospects drear, and forward, though I canna see, I guess and fear.
Oh, thank you. Wow.
I mean, that's addressed to a small creature, and it's basically saying, man's dominion has not done well for you. It's not done well for me either. We are twins, us two. We are like each other, this wee poor creature turned over with my plough and me pushing the plough. It's a brilliant piece of imagining. I mean, it's unheralded in world literature, that, to suddenly see that kind of empathy in action between nature and a poet's mind.
And thank you for giving us the opportunity to hear it in a language that was your local dialect or what you heard growing up in your.
Well, that was my point, Catherine, is that, those words don't seem strange to me. Cranry called. I mean, my granny used to talk like that. It's cranry called. It was almost the onomatopoeia, the sound of the thing they were describing, that they sounded called as they were saying the words. That's the beauty of that language.
And there is another connection there to nature is the union of the natural world, man, and the animals.
Yeah.
That was another thing he connected in his poems.
I mean, again and again. I mean, there was a tradition in ancient Scots poetry. You see it in Alan Ramsay, you see it in the great Edinburgh poet Robert Fergusson, who Burns adored. They would write poems in the voices of animals or addressed to animals, but never as well as Burns did. And Burns could take the mindset of a sheep, old Maley, and absolutely identify with him. Children understand this. Most of the great children's stories, or many of them, involve animals and speaking animals. And we forget that in adulthood, that kind of magical realism, if you like. But Burns didn't forget it. And his poems are especially loved by children because they go to the heart of a kind of delight, a sense of magic. The animals can feel things too, and you can identify with them, and they can maybe even speak. I love all that in Burns. There are no boundaries between reality and the imagination for him. He's often thought of as a social poet, reflecting social realities and difficulties, but he's also a magic realist, a kind of fantasist.
You mentioned in relation to Amuse how it was just great literature. But of course, we need to touch on that Burns grew up in great poverty and wasn't an academic. You also grew up in a working class background in rural place. So what parallels there what insight can you give us? Because he didn't have the big literary education.
No, he didn't. I mean, unlike many of the great Augustan or Romantic poets, even of that period, he was preceded by these great Augustans, Pope and Dryden and so on. And then in his own generation, the so-called Romantics, Keats and Shelley and Wordsworth and Coleridge, they were often Oxford and Cambridge educated men. And I say men deliberately. Burns, though a man, came from a very different social world. His parents, his father in particular, spent everything he had on the two boys' education. Robert Burns and his brother Gilbert, they did have a classical education at home in the cottage, with a visiting tutor where they learnt Latin and Greek and studied poetry and prose. But it was a very different experience of education from what these other Romantics had. There was no Oxford and Cambridge. It was straight out of the classroom into the field to push a plough and to go through, as he would say, clabber and mud, sucking your boots off as you were trying to make a living as both a genius poet and, more locally, a poor farmer. So I identified with that. I think we all did. Anybody who's grown up in relative, simplicity, let me put it that way, if not poverty, understands the struggle that's special to Burns. Sometimes he's described as a sort of everyman. It's not that he's an everyman, he's a voice for the common man. There's a tremendous sense of fellowship in Burns, because whatever you've been through, he's going through it too, or he understands low spirits, low earnings. The pressure of economic reality was on him all the time. So yes, that makes him a political poet for me. Ever since I was very young, I looked to him as a great poet of equality and fairness. It's no accident that it's Robert Burns who wrote Auld Lang Syne, the great international anthem of fellowship. And no accident that he wrote A Man's a Man for all that, that the whole world our shall brothers be for all that, he says. And these are sentiments that are specific to Robert Burns. That's why, of all these great poets that we've mentioned, he's the one that we're celebrating annually. He's the one that stirs a very special sense of identification in people's breasts. So every year we have this celebration, Burns Night, and it's because of that. It's because there's something about him which invites the communion of all people. regardless of their class or sex or status.
Welcome back. Welcome back. And we have been enjoying our Burn Supper. Thank you to Danny and to Louise for cooking for us. Yeah, that's a round of applause. So, but yes, we would like to continue with our live music presentations. And now I'd like to introduce two new artists for this evening. And this is Caroline Chan and Robert Gutierrez. Yes. So they will be doing two numbers for us. The Banks of Doom, traditional number, but then also a composition, I think, of Caroline's, which she is calling Super Trees. She might tell you a little bit about that. So, Caroline Chan and Robert Gutierrez, off you go. Thank you. Yes, so inspired by Burns. Yep. Okay, so you have heard from Andrew Hagen. You heard him give his presentation to a mouse. So now we're going to something even smaller, a lapse, to give us a recital. Good friend, Catherine Queen.
Happy Burns Night. To a louse. Hot were you gone, ye crowling furly? Your impudence protects you sairly. I canna say, but ye strut rarely, old gauze and lace. Though faith, I fear ye dine but sparely on sic a place. Ye ugly, creeping, blasting oner, detested, shunned by saint and sinner. How dare ye set your fits upon her, so fine a lady? He somewhere else and seek your dinner on some poor body. Now hold you there, you're out of sight, below the fatteral snug and tight. Now faith ye yet you'll no be right, so you get on it. But Vera Tapler's towering height, oh Mrs. Bonnet. Oh Jenny, dinna toss your head and set your beauties abread. You little ken what cursed speed the louse is making. The thinks and fingers' ends I dread are notice taking. I wad some power the leastly gie us to see ourselves as ither see us. It wad frae money a blunder free us, and foolish notion, what airs and dress and gait would lee us, and e'en devotion. Thank you.
Yes, if we could see ourselves as others. Okay, and we move on now to wonderful Lady Brown, singing unaccompanied, Brave Woman to the Cheers.
Hello. We come to the sentimental part of the evening, and that's how I feel this evening, because you know this is what it's like every day in Scotland. Well, what can I say? I love this time of the year because Burns is probably one of the reasons that I fell in love with music and words. His ability to write about everything from politics to relationships, I mean both love and sex, and the environment. So I always find it incredibly hard because I never know what Burns song to pick, because truly I do love them all. So I opted for Burns in the Environment. So my first song is Green Grow the Rashes O. And I love this song because he's writing about two different types of men, but what unifies them is spending time with women. And I especially love the last verse where he says, all nature swears her lovely dears, her noblest work she classes O. Her prentice hand she tried on man, and then she made the lassies O. So she practiced with men and then made her finest work. There we go. What can be said about that? So enjoy. Green grow the rashes O, green grow the rashes O. The sweetest hours that e'er I spent were spent among the lassies O. There's naught but care on every hand, in every hour that passes, oh, what signifies the life, oh man, and werny for the lassies, oh. Green grow the rashes, oh, green grow the rashes, oh. The sweetest hours that e'er I spent were spent among the lassies, oh. The worldly race may riches chase, and riches still may fly them, oh. And though at last they catch them fast, their hearts can ne'er enjoy them, oh. Green grow the rashes, oh, green grow the rashes, oh. The sweetest hours that e'er I spent were spent among the lassies, oh. But gie me a canny or a teen, my arms around my dearie, oh, and worldly cares and worldly men may aga tapsel teary, oh. Green grow the rashes, oh, green grow the rushes, oh, the sweetest hours that e'er I spent were spent among the lassies, oh. And ye say, "Dus, ye sneer at this, you're naught but senseless asses, oh." The wisest man the world e'er seen, he dearly loved the lassies, oh. Green grow the rushes, oh, green grow the rushes, oh, the sweetest hours that e'er I spent were spent among the lassies, oh. Old nature swears her lovely dears, her noblest work she classes o'er, her prentice hand she tried on man, and then she made the lassies, oh. Green grow the rushes, oh, green grow the rushes, oh, the sweetest hours that e'er I spent were spent among the lassies, oh. Thanks. It's funny, I didn't know what I was going to say before this next song, but I was just on the walk here, from my seat to here. I was thinking, and I actually, I love living in London, believe me, but I actually take for granted growing up in Scotland. My dad calls it God's country, and if you've been there, it truly is. This next song is my granddad's favourite song, and I'm from the northeast coast of Scotland. And my dad and my granddad are from this place called Carnoustie. And there's this road where you walk up and you can see the fields and then the sea. And in this song, there's just a line in it where it talks about the waves. I actually can't remember what the line is now, but the waves going on forever. And I just think, I can see why this is my granddad's favourite song, because it's actually for this moment here on this stretch of land. And actually, Burns didn't write this song. It was written by a woman, and but he collected it and changed some of the words and added his own verses. But it's a woman who's out tending the field and looking across the land and singing to the man that she loves. So this is Ca the Yows. Ca the yows to the nurse, ca them war the heather grows, ca them war the burnie rose, my bonnie dearie. Hark the mavis evening song, soon in Cluden's woods among, then a folding let us gang, my bonnie dearie. Ca the yows to the nurse, ca them war the heather grows, ca them war the burnie rose, my bonnie dearie. We'll gae down to Cluden side, through the hazel spreading wide, o'er the waves that sweetly glide, to the moon sae clearly. Ca the yows to the nurse, ca them war the heather grows, ca them war the burnie rose, my bonnie dearie. Gayst not bogles shalt thou fear, thou to love and hence sae dear, Nocht o ill may come thee near, my bonnie dearie. Ca the yows to the nurse, ca them war the heather grows, bonny dearie, fair and lovely as thou art, thou hast stolen my very heart. I can dee, but canna part, my bonny dearie. Ca the years to the nurse, ca the more the heather grows, ca the more the burning rose, my bonny dearie.
Sensation, as always, Layla Brown. Thank you so much. Okay, so now we've got a little bit more of Andrew O'Hagan's conversation with Catherine Kelly to give to you, and there's about 5-6 minutes of this. We are going to be enjoying some Kraken while this is going on, so I hope you do too, and we'll be back with you live shortly.
The whole world our shall brothers be for all that, he says. And these are sentiments that are specific to Robert Burns. That's why, of all these great poets that we've mentioned, he's the one that we're celebrating annually. He's the one that stirs a very special sense of identification in people's breasts. You know, so every year we have this celebration, Burns Night, and it's because of that. It's because there's something about him which invites the communion of all people, regardless of their class or sex or status.
But of course, he was responding to the times he was living in, like any writer or poet. And this was a time of amazing change, the late part of the 18th century.
Oh, yes. I mean, he was writing in the cusp of the French Revolution, we must remember, and was indeed, betimes, wholly sympathetic to that movement. He was a bit of a contradiction, Burns. I mean, he was never more Scottish than in his contradictions. You know, he ran with the hare and the hounds a wee bit, you know. On the one hand, he could write great panegyrics, great, you know, poems in tribute to royalty and to the idea of the united kingdom. And on the other hand, he was a pure nationalist, a pure patriot who thought that kings should be got rid of, and he was a supporter of the French Revolution. So Burns has everything in him, including contradiction, but we love him for that. You know, you don't look to a poet for consistency of political or moral view. You look to them for a kind of humanness and a genius at bringing that forward. But yes, I mean, he was living through times of great ferment. You know, the Industrial Revolution was happening. You know, the rural practices that he was you know, engaged with were about to be swept away. Machinery was coming, tractors were coming, the plough and the mouse that it unseated from its wee hoose were about to be a thing of the past. So this again is a historical poet. He's right on the cusp of major change.
And of course, you hit on there, he wasn't just the poor lad out in the field. He did have good connections. His first book was fundraised by friends, his first poetry book, and he went off to Edinburgh. And I think that was the first time he actually stood on carpet to actually deliver his pieces to the salon. But he travelled with and stayed with the dukes and the lairds. And there was just one piece that I didn't know about, where he petitioned one of the Duke of Atholl to plant some trees, as he would find this a much more engaging view to look at. And apparently, and he wrote a whole poem about this.
Yes, I mean, he wasn't shy about that. I mean, it was a one-man pressure group on the gentry of the day, saying, come on, we have a responsibility to this landscape that I'm writing about. It's not just a playground for the rich, or indeed a commercial opportunity in terms of farming it and the agricultural business. He thought that the landscape needed looking after. He wrote to several of the nobility in that way. And he tried to make contact with several others, like James Boswell, who later became the great biographer of Dr. Johnson. He was an Ayrshire too, and the Laird of Auchinleck, a very different class from Robert Burns. In fact, he shunned Robert Burns from his door for being the lowly ploughman and wouldn't let him in. But that's to his discredit, I think, that these two great geniuses of Scottish literature actually were neighbours at one time and never really met. So, but Burns was always trying to do his bit to raise the consciousness of the nobility in terms of looking after the landscape of Ayrshire.
And I believe today that it's the Briar Water area. They did plant the trees and they're still there today, and it's the most scenic and beautiful area, apparently.
Well, that's fantastic. I mean, the Briar Water trees stand as a testament to this day to Burns's effort to make people aware of what the landscape was in your life, not just in your life, but in the life of people to come after. You know, there we are 250 years later. These trees are there both sheltering and providing oxygen for the people who live there now. So it's a lovely thing to think about. He had a historical sense, I think the great writers do, that they know that their own time is their own time, and crucial, of course, but that there's something else, futurity, and how a poet's work and efforts will last in the memory of readers all over the world.
So then what do you think Burns would have thought of COP26 and all the attention of the world on Scotland to come up with answers to save the planet? Where do you think he would have fitted in there?
I think Burns would have been a great encourager of COP26, and he wanted them to go much further. He would have wanted them to stand up and be counted and see this as a once-in-a-generation opportunity to revive the connection between individual imagination and the landscape and the environment. So he would have been in favour of it, but he would have been pushing them much harder, I think.
And that was a great time of change and hardship and uncertainty he lived in, and he still saw the beauty of it, but highlighted the problems for change. So we're in that times today with our pandemic or post-pandemic, and we're not sure of the future and where we go as humanity. So what do you think we could learn from Burns? What can he teach us about how to go forward, do you think?
Well, you know, he's a great poet of reassurance and of commonality. You know, we've just been through this difficult time in the last couple of years, and he's one of the writers I would reach to for encouragement when it comes to the business of having a community spirit. Here we are on speaking tonight on behalf of the Primrose Hill Community Association. That's what it's about. You know, Burns would have been saying, on you go, you know, recover together, because you can't do it alone. And he lived through disease, poverty, pandemic, enormous stresses that lasted for a long time, but he was the great poet of recovery, of coming together and joining forces. So I think it's a good occasion tonight to raise a glass to him and to that same spirit of community and recovery.
Yeah, and to overcoming all of that, and for the planet to still keep going regardless of what the humans are doing. And I love, you know, getting back to the way you described, he's a poet of togetherness, a poet of, you know, common experience, and hopefully that's what we can enjoy tonight. And thank you so much for giving us more insight into the world of Burns, and that it's not just much as we love our haggis and our tartan and our diddly music, which we are enjoying tonight already, these are greater messages and meaning that he brings to us even today.
Well, they coexist. You know, we can enjoy the haggis, and let's do that, and let's have a whiskey together and let's sing the songs, but also remember that this was a great genius of human connectedness that we're talking about tonight, not just a face on a tin of biscuits or a national bard. He was an international voice of reason and fellowship. So thanks for having me. It's been great to talk about him, and I hope to join you in person before long.
That would be great. Thank you so much, Andrew. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you.
Welcome back. This is a little dance song, so if you'd like to clear a space next to the couch, have a little boogie. 1, 2, 3.
Early spring leads sunny summer, till yellow autumn blesses near. Then in his wake comes the gloomy winter, till smiling spring again appears. The seasons dancing and life advancing, the time and nature's past. They're never changing and rearranging. I adore my bunny bell.
Woo! Awesome! The seasons dancing
And life advancing, all time and nature changes hands. Seasons changing and seasons ranging. I adore my bunny bell.
all together.
Let's feel the mountain for the morning. All time and nature's hands. Seasons ranging and seasons ranging. I adore my bunny bell. I adore my bunny bell.
I adore
My
bunny
bunny
Fellows, thank you. Thank you to the Jolly Beggars. And now, an addition to our running order, a late addition to our running order, a man who has created a self-penned paean to Robert Burns. David, I don't know his other name. Janelle, here he is. David.
Firstly, thank you very, very much, guys. It's what a wonderful evening. You are incredibly spectacularly talented. This poem came about sort of quite by accident. It was. I know that I worked for the Grants family in their distillery many, many years ago. So I've always had a great love for Robbie Burns since then. And being a sort of a poet, I felt I had to do some kind of homage. That's the man. And last year was I wrote a poem about Keats called An Ode to Keats. And this year, I wrote a poem called A Drink for Burns. Now, I am half Scottish. My accent is spectacularly terrible. So you'll have to forgive me, especially. But I'll give it my best shot. That's all you can do. A drink for Burns. Ah, Robbie. Hey, if you were a drink, you couldn't be a bottle of wine. Ah, you'd be a grand old rare whiskey. That's near impossible to find. Bursting with heart and passion, yet full of subtle surprise. The kind of bottle that when it's gone, it'll bring a tear to your eye. Great is an overused word. One I know you'd decline. But sometimes it comes about with a passionate time. From the rich cellar of your life, from all who shared your words and drink and dine, there are many now proud to say that great chieftain Haggis is a great friend of mine. And thank you very much.
So at this point in the evening, it is traditional for us to have a number of toasts. And if you have a toast that you would like to share with the assembly, so those of you at home, please do put something in the chat, and we'll try and pick it up there. But first of all, we will be doing the toast to the Lassies. It's usually this is a speech, but on this occasion we thought with such talented musicians in the room, we would actually ask the Jolly Beggars to give us something that they felt spoke to the feminine, that could fulfill this toast to the Lassies. And so, a cappella, they are going to be giving us their Wild Mountain Time. So, here we are.
We'll all go together to pluck wild mountain thyme all around the blooming heather. Will you go, Lassie, go? Beyond your crystal fountain, and around it I will pile all of the flowers of the mountain. Will you go, Lassie? And we'll all go together to pluck wild mountain thyme all around the blooming heather. Will you go, Lassie? If my true love she were gone, I could not find another where wild mountain thyme grows around the blooming heather. Will you go, Lassie, go? And we'll all go together to pluck wild mountain thyme all around the blooming heather. Will you go, Lassie, go? Go on, everyone. And we'll all go together to pluck wild mountain thyme all around the blooming heather. Will you go, Lassie, go?
To the Lassies.
Cheers.
And the laddies.
Ah, the jolly beggars. You are beggars indeed. And actually, being the sophisticated modern man that I am, I can't quite bring myself to raise the toast to the lassies, but I would ask the gentlemen in the room to raise their glasses to the feminine principle, the universal feminine principle, which brings us all into being. Ah! Stand up. Stand up. Here we go. Okay. So be it. So be it. What can you do? And now I would like to invite Catherine McQueen to come up and give her reply to the toast to the lassies. Catherine, here we go.
Thank you, thank you. So I would like to do the toast to the laddies tonight. And it's actually a little poem that I wrote myself. My favourite being on this earth is a wee little laddie to whom I gave birth. He made me look at you all in a different way, and now I see more clearly where you're frae. We are different, you and I, like ice cream and apple pie, but we do complement one another, and from each other we've a lot to discover. So let's just try to get along and have some fun together with drink and song. And we can make each other's lives so much better when we dinna fret and put each other under pressure. To the laddies. Raise your glasses to the laddies. Cheers.
Thank you, Catherine. And it's back to the beggars, I'm afraid. You're back up, fellas. Charlie is my darling. And again, this is a good dance number, so get your feet tapping.
Can we have people dancing in this room as well? Is that possible? No? No? Come on, damn you all. Space threat. We won't start until you all quiet. 1, 2, 3, 4. This is a song about a period of time, long time ago, when Bonnie Prince Charlie appeared in Edinburgh. He was the first Jacobean rock star. And all the lassies were apt to see him and catch a glimpse of Bonnie Prince Charlie. And he came to our town, so this is a song about him. Was on a Monday morning, bright and early in the year, when Charlie he came to Allerton, to Edinburgh, the young Buccaneer. Oh!
As he was walking up the street, the city for to view, but there he saw a bonny lad.
as he turned upon the stairs like a twirling on a pin. And who's so ready but that lassie to let young laddie in? Having a beautiful time.
Johnny is my darling, my darling, my darling. The young Chevalier. My darling, my darling, my darling. My darling, the young Chevalier. He took his Jenny on his knee, all in his Highland dress. Oh, who's so ready but himself to please a bonny lad? Hey, Charlie is my darling, my darling, my darling. Charlie is my darling, the young Chevalier. Charlie is my darling, my darling, my darling. Charlie is my darling, the young Chevalier. It's up.
It's up yon heathery mountain and down yon scroggy glen.
The scruggiest.
We dare not go a milking. I think there's a sexual euphemism for Charlie and his
Charlie is my darling, my darling, my darling. Charlie is my darling, the young Chevalier. Charlie is my darling, my darling, my darling. Charlie is my darling, the young Chevalier. Charlie is my darling, my darling, my darling. Charlie is my darling, the young Chevalier. Charlie is my darling, my darling, my darling. Charlie is my darling, the young Chevalier.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, who's my darling? Charlie. Charlie! That's good. Then just back to Andrew Hagen for two romantic days.
One of my favourite single poems of Robert Burns is To a Mountain Daisy. It's not often referred to nowadays, but again, it's another of those poems which demonstrates the connection between Burns and the natural landscape. To a Mountain Daisy, on turning one down with the plough in April 1786. Wee modest crimson tippet flower, thou's met me in an evil hour, for I'm on crush among the stour thy slender stem. To spare thee now is past my power, thou bonny gem. Alas, it's no thy neighbour sweet, the bonny lark, companion meet, bending thee among the dewy wheat with spreckled breast, when upward swinging, blithe, we greet the purpling east. Cold blew the bitter biting north upon thy early humble birth, yet cheerfully thou glinted forth amid the storm, scarce reared above the parent earth thy tender form. The flaunting flowers our gardens yield, high sheltering woods, and was Mon's shield, but thou, beneath the random bield of clod or stain, adorns the histy stibble field, unseen, alone. There, in thy scanty mantle clad, thy snowy bosom sunward spread. Thou lifts thy unassuming head in humble guise, but now the share uptears thy bed, and low thy lies. Such is the fate of artless maid, sweet flower of the rural shade, by love's simplicity betrayed and guileless trust, till she, like thee, all soiled, is laid low in the dust. Such is the fate of simple bard. On life's rough ocean luckless starred, unskilled he to note the card of prudent lore, till billows rage and gales blow hard and whirl him o'er. Such fate to suffering worth is given, who long with wants and woes is striven, by human pride or cunning driven to misery's brink, till wretched of every stay but heaven, he, ruined, sink. Even though who mourns the daisy's fate, that fate is thine, no distant date. Stern ruins plowshares drives elate, full in thy bloom, till crushed beneath the furrow's weight shall be thy doom.
Quiet. Thank you, Andrew. And here we're back again. So our evening is coming to a close. We still have a little bit of excitement and talents for you, though, I'm glad to say. But I think at this point we should all actually raise our glasses to the man of the hour, to Robert Burns.
Mr. Burns.
To Robert Burns, to the bard, the great genius of Scotland.
Chevalier.
So yes, coming to the end of our evening, a moment of parting upon us. But what better way to mark that than Burns's beautiful song, A Fond Kiss. So Elise is back with us, Elise Boileau, supported by them Jolly Beggars. How you done? Woohoo! Catherine Queen. Andrew O'Hagan. And the piper. Woo! And thanks to Peter on the camera as always. Woo! And Jason and Nick, the publicity crew, and Mike for starting. But first of all, please, special thanks to my good friend and our musical director, Catherine Kelly.
Hey!
Hello, Catherine. Great special magic on these occasions.
And a big thanks to Tim Kirkpatrick and the events team at Primrose Hill Community Centre. We've been challenged like everyone else with the pandemic, but we're here tonight, undaunted, for Burns Night. So well done to Tim and the events team at Primrose Hill Community Centre.
And I'm very pleased to be able to give Catherine, don't go away, this most fantastic
Oh, wonderful.
Suits you.
So please be upstanding, everybody, as we finish the evening with Burns's anthem, Old Lang Syne, a song of fellowship. Let us strengthen our bonds with each other as we sing.
What's that?
Here we go.
I can hear something. It's like tilting.
Thank you. Good night, everybody. Find us on YouTube.